Atlantic. It seems impossible that we can continue to take this unending pounding and still remain in one piece. One's joints ache and ache from the continuous battle of trying to remain upright.
On board, 100 men crowd into space built for fewer than 50. Water pours in through seams, hatches, and ventilators.
Mess deck is a terrifying place to venture near. Knee-deep in seawater, tables smashed, clothes floating around in it, breakfast stirred in, the crew in an almost stupor from the nightmarishness of it all. If they could only portray all this in their recruiting posters.
The Canadian Navy is in the front line of the fight against the U-boat. They must protect the giant convoys of freighters and their vital cargo. But the dock workers know many of the men and boys of the merchant ships will never come back.
It was the merchant seamen who suffered the most. They couldn't fight back, and they were the best targets. They never knew when they would be singled out for extinction. The suspense must have been awful.
The trip across the Atlantic is slow and treacherous. In defiance of security rules, Frank Curry keeps a secret diary.
December 1941. Mountainous seas are breaking completely over the ship, and it is turning into massive coatings of ice as it hits. We are sheathed in 16 inches of ice. I do not know what keeps us from going to the bottom of the Atlantic.
The wolf packs of German U-boats inflict their greatest destruction in an area of the Atlantic out of range of Allied air cover. Sailors call it the Black Pit.
Sunday, May 10th, 1942. Sharp alteration of course on emergency signal. 6 to 8 German U-boats in pack formation laying across our course. All-out effort to reach convoy under attack. It had lost 16 ships. Sunday, May 17th, 1942. We lost a ship on the far side during the night. Nothing we could do about it. Terrible feeling of helplessness.
Fewer than half the merchant seamen survived the sinking of their ships. Freighters laden with iron ore or oil or explosives doom their entire crew. $3,650 sailors and merchant seamen perished during the war. Those who return safely also pay an awful price. Even on land, Curry's crew cannot escape the dark grip of the war at sea.
Half the crew took to the streets and battled amongst themselves in a wild, terrifying night. It was as if all the years of harsh and brutal living conditions had finally turned us into animals. It was degrading and depressing. An awful reflection on us and our lives, the war and what it had done to us.
At the end of 1941, the war widens and tolerance becomes its casualty.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced.
Sunday, December 7th, 1941. Japan's attack on the United States naval base brings a new enemy and a new ally into the war. On Canada's west coast, it ignites years of smoldering fear and resentment against Japanese Canadians.
Like moles, we burrow within after dark, and only dare to peek out of the window.
Muriel Kitagawa is Canadian by birth, as is her husband Eddie and 4 young children. But she tells her brother, who is away at medical school in Toronto, that they are no longer wanted in their own country.
Dear Wes, BC is falling all over itself in the scramble to be the first to kick us out from jobs and homes. It has just boiled down to race persecution, and signs have been posted on all highways. Japs, keep out.
Japanese Canadians had already been photographed, fingerprinted, and identified by number. Now their schools and newspapers are closed. 1,200 fishing boats are seized. Sawmills, hotels, and the Canadian Pacific Railway fire Japanese Canadian workers. Then, on December 18th, Japan attacks the British colony of Hong Kong. Most of the 2,000 Canadian soldiers defending the island are killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. The news of Hong Kong feeds growing anger and panic. So too does this wartime propaganda film produced by the National Film Board.
The soldiers of the rising sun are little men, quick and wiry. Their uniforms are slovenly. Their faces, even in the heat of battle, are tawny masks, blank, expressionless. They believe that they have embarked upon a holy war.
British Columbia prepares for an attack. RCMP and military officials advised the Canadian government that Japanese Canadians pose no threat to national security. But the press and the public demand action. Ian Mackenzie, the federal cabinet minister from British Columbia, pushes the cabinet into action.
It is the government's plan to get these people out of BC as fast as possible. It is my personal intention, as long as I remain in public life, to see they never come back here. Let our slogan be for British Columbia: no Japs from the Rockies to the seas.
A 100-mile wide strip along the coast is designated a protected area. 22,000 men, women, and children of Japanese origin are forcibly uprooted from their homes, their jobs, and schools. Most of them are either naturalized citizens or born in Canada. They can take only 2 small suitcases each. Believing they will return, their valued possessions are carefully wrapped and stored. Many of those detained are taken to the livestock pens at Vancouver's Hastings Park Fairgrounds. Muriel Kitagawa goes there to visit a friend.
Aiko sleeps in a partitioned stall. This stall was the former home of a pair of stallions, and boy, oh boy, did they leave their odor behind. The whole place is impregnated with the smell of ancient manure and maggots. Here and there I saw a child's doll and teddy bear. An old lady was crying. saying she would rather have died than to come to such a place.
After months in animal stalls, they are shipped on sealed trains to the interior. Families are separated. Men to road and lumber camps. Women and children to shanty towns in the British Columbia wilderness. Their new homes are tents, tar paper huts, and crude shacks. In January 1943, the Canadian government authorizes the sale of all the properties of Japanese Canadians. Homes, cars, businesses are sold for a fraction of their worth. The lives they have built in Canada have been erased. Kitagawa rages against her government.
The bitterness, the anguish is complete. You who deal in lifeless figures, files, and statistics could never measure the depth of hurt and outrage dealt out to those of us who love this land. It is because we are Canadians that we protest the violation of our birthright.
The movement of Japanese Canadians during the war is the largest forced exodus in Canadian history. Many will never return to the place they called home. The winter of 1942 brings bitter news. The Allies are losing the war in Russia, North Africa, and the Pacific. And at home, an old conflict has returned.
I shall urge, with all the power I can bring to bear, compulsory selective service over the whole field of war.
Former Prime Minister Arthur Meehan has returned to lead the Conservative Party. He heaps scorn on Prime Minister Mackenzie King's refusal to introduce conscription.
The reason is, the head of the government says, that if we compel Canadians to fight to save Canada, we will destroy the unity of the nation. Can any normal mind accept such a preposterous contention?
King is haunted by the Conscription Act of the First War, which split the country and ruined the career of his mentor, Sir Wilfrid Laurier. Meehan is the man who drafted that act. King fears and loathes him.
I am getting past the time when I can fight in public with a man of Meehan's type, who is sarcastic, vitriolic, and the meanest type of politician.
200 prominent industrialists, community leaders, and clergy meet in Toronto to form the Committee for Total War. Although there is no shortage of soldiers, French Canadians are not signing up at the same rate as English Canadians. James Duncan, president of Massey Harris and a veteran of the First War, denounces those who do not accept the need for conscription.
I cannot help but marvel at the blindness that has struck them. I marvel that there can be a man or woman in this Dominion who does not understand that we are not fighting to defend this country or that country, but for our very existence as a free and independent nation, for the preservation of our inheritance, of our institutions, and our democracy.
The group known as the Toronto 200 demand immediate conscription. English-language newspapers led by the Globe and Mail take up the cause. King tries to buy time. He announces a plebiscite that will ask Canadians to release his government from its no conscription promise. He hopes to defuse his political opponents, but he has lit a fire in Quebec. André Laurendeau is the editor of the journal L'Action Nationale. At the age of 29, he is already one of French Canada's most important thinkers. He voices their sense of betrayal.
French Canadian nationalists are opposed to the very principle of the plebiscite. They deny the government the right to ask the majority to cancel a promise made to the minority. They repudiate the validity of the Canadian response in advance.
"10,000 people rally at St. James Market in Montreal. Labour, farm, youth, and community groups have formed La Ligue pour la Défense du Canada. They are joined by Quebec's elite. The League believes it is in the country's best interest to vote no.
A small country of 11 million inhabitants cannot be the arsenal of the democracies and the allied nations, and, at the same time, an inexhaustible reservoir of fighting men. Canada has no right, let alone obligation, to sabotage itself.
In the street, loudspeakers are drowned out by passing streetcars. The crowd grows angry. When police arrive, a riot breaks out. Some demonstrators are arrested, more are injured. In Quebec, many newspapers fear the loss of government advertising and do not support the no side. The publicly funded Radio-Canada refuses to give the League airtime. Government ads brand the no side as traitors.
English Canadians thought we were traitors who hadn't the courage to fight. We saw in them the horrible embodiment of might makes right.
The plebiscite has backfired. The country is riven by dispute. On April 27th, Canadians cast their ballots. Outside Quebec, 80% vote yes to conscription. In Quebec, 72% vote no. French Canadians have lost the plebiscite, but gained a new sense of national solidarity.
Together, we have lived through an hour of unanimity the like of which has never been known in our history. French Canadians refused to let themselves be pushed around.
Mackenzie King does not intend to introduce conscription. He finds a way out in a phrase in a newspaper editorial. Not necessarily conscription, but conscription if necessary. He adopts it as his slogan. The crisis has passed for the moment. By the summer of 1942, Canadian troops have been in England for almost 3 years, waiting to go to war. But Allied High Command has secret plans for them, a raid on France. It will placate their Soviet allies, test German defenses, and it will give the Canadian boys a taste of battle. On August 19, 1942, 5,000 Canadian soldiers are heading for a small resort town on the French coast. Its name is Dieppe.
There was a moon, small and pale, over my right shoulder that started me thinking of home and my girlfriend in Halifax.
19-year-old able seaman Albert Kirby from Woodstock, Ontario, pilots one of the landing craft. The raid's success depends on perfect execution and complete surprise. As they approach France, Kirby sees the sky light up with tracer paths.
It appeared the enemy was awake and at action stations. Our hope of a surprise landing was dashed.
The plan has already gone awry. At sunrise, Captain Denny Whitaker of the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry lands on the beach. His first glance tells him they are trapped. Dieppe is a German fortress flanked by towering cliffs. Sea and air bombardments have done only minor damage. The Germans are waiting for them.
Bullets flew everywhere. Around me, men were being hit and bodies were piling up one on top of the other. It was terrifying.
Miraculously, Whitaker and a few of his men fight their way off the beach into the town. On the command ship, out in the English Channel, Major General Hamilton Roberts thinks his troops have penetrated German defenses. He orders his reserves to land. It is a fateful mistake. The 600 men of Montreal's Les Fusiliers Montréal and their 29-year-old commander, Lieutenant Colonel Dollard Menard, have been sent into slaughter.
I was hit by a bullet and knocked to the ground. Bullet is like a razor cut to the face. At first you don't feel the pain. I was hit a second time. It seemed to explode all around me. I was no longer sure I was still in one piece. I managed to get up when I was hit for the third time, this time in my right wrist.
Three hours later, the order to retreat is finally given. Captain Denny Whitaker must lead his men back through the inferno of the beach. 200 of them will not make it.
The worst part was the dash for the boats amid a hail of bullets and mortar or shell fire. I expected every step to be my last.
Lieutenant Colonel Dollard Menard, already hit 3 times, is still on the beach.
I was hit in the right leg just below the knee, but I continued on. The last bullet hit me below the right ankle and nailed me to the ground for good. I began to pray.
He is dragged, unconscious, to safety. As the men flee for their lives, crews from the Department of National Defense film what was supposed to be the propaganda film of 1942. Canadians will never see it. Fewer than half of the Canadian soldiers who embarked for France returned to England. Able seaman Albert Kirby is one of them.
What a mixture of feelings went through my body. So relieved to be home. So happy to be in one piece. So ashamed to have come home alone. So angry that I was even a part of something so confusing and apparently unrewarding, without even knowing what I was doing or exactly where I'd been.
At home, headlines proclaim the success of Dieppe. But casualty lists provide a telling rebuke. In one morning on a French beach, 907 Canadians have died. 586 have been wounded. 1,856 will spend the rest of the war in German POW camps. That August, a small burial service is held in England. Canadian General Andrew MacNaughton makes a pledge to his dead young soldiers.
Boys, you will not be forgotten. You will be avenged. I promise you.
Four years into the war, Canada readies for the ultimate battle as the nations of the New World prepare to liberate the Old. At home, a prairie preacher wins a historic victory. In Ottawa, the government teeters on the brink of collapse. The war will fuel the hopes of many. It will crush the dreams of others. In 1942, the war extends its reach to the northern edge of the continent.